I hope we will not hear those nanny and governess arguments in the debate today. My Lords, I beg to move.
My Lords, the question is that the motion standing in the name of the noble Lord Henderson of Brompton be agreed to.
My Lords, as I stand here before you for the first time, I am very conscious that I follow in the path of my ancestors. Many of them took their place here, as I do, and just a few from the throne. I am aware that the last Duke of Gloucester to speak here frequently battled with his brother-in-law, the Duke of Sussex, over the matter of slavery. The victory eventually went to Sussex, perhaps with a little help from Wilberforce and his friends. And I hope today to restore some balance to the honor and prestige of the title that I am privileged to use in this chamber. Succeeding generations will regard the issue we are to discuss with the same disdain we would now reserve for the policy and practice of slavery. Your Lordships may well know that in the 19th century, epidemics of cholera decimated parts of the population, and that the cause of the problem, polluted water supply, was identified by statistical analysis, enabling Parliament to pass the necessary legislation that totally eradicated the problem. Inevitably, this process took much longer than necessary due to ill-informed opposition and vested interest. This debate has been called to take note of the 1983 Royal College of Physicians report, Health or Smoking? As you have heard, the first report was published in 1962, and it was a consequence of that report that ASH was set up. ASH standing for Action on Smoking and Health, and it is the organization that I am privileged to be a patron of. The second report was in 1971, and the third in 1977. All of them have been written by the most eminent and knowledgeable experts in this field, reporting in a straightforward fashion the statistics and the experience of the consequences of the smoking habit. Each subsequent report has amplified the findings of its predecessor, and the gaps in the overall picture slowly filled in, a picture which has also been revealed in every other country where similar research has been undertaken. Although sadly, I must emphasize that this country has suffered the effects of tobacco more than any other due to our history of high consumption. The depressing fact remains that virtually none of the recommendations in the reports have been carried out fully, even though everyone now accepts the figures as accurate. My Lords, this volume may induce in its readers a sense of déjà vu, but this repetition is necessary because of the slowness of the response by the public and its legislators. The reports chart the consequences of the tobacco habit nationally. Like a leaky bath tap left unrepaired, the current stain on the tub is inevitably larger and more distinct than that of 1962. If I may quote one statistic from the report, if you take 1,000 young smokers who smoke 1 pack a day, statistically, 1 will be murdered, 6 will die on the roads, but 250 will die prematurely from any of the following smoking-induced diseases: lung cancer, coronary heart disease, chronic bronchitis, emphysema, cancer of the esophagus, of the mouth, of the larynx, of the bladder, of the pancreas, or strokes, brought about by the fact that the human body is not designed to absorb chemicals inhaled through the respiratory system. The conclusion that the Royal College draws is very plain. Smoking is the single most important cause of preventable ill health, disability, and premature death in Britain today. This will continue to be so for many decades, unless there is a much greater change in the rate of consumption. On logical grounds, there is a clear case for the total ban of such poison, but there are practical and humanitarian reasons for not doing so. 16 million people still smoke regularly, many of whom started when it was still considered a socially acceptable habit. The identification of it as a self-destructive practice came too late for many who were already addicted. Addiction is an aspect of tobacco smoking that puts it in a very special category. We learn from government surveys that 60% of people who smoke wish to give up, and that 70% have tried to at least once. The power of addiction to nicotine is shown by one dramatic statistic. Even after undergoing major lung cancer surgery, 48% of patients, if they survive, start smoking again. For such addiction, it is impossible to legislate a ban. What is possible is to concentrate on non-smokers, particularly the young, and make sure that they are fully aware of the consequences of smoking, firstly to their health, and secondly, the strength of the addiction. It is still fashionable to mention freedom when anyone from the health professions tries to take action about smoking. A moment's thought would show that the freedom argument belongs not to the tobacco industry, but to the health professions, as most smokers begin smoking when they are children, not a free adult choice by definition. And when as adults they try to give up, they encounter unexpected problems. The new government report on children smoking shows that secondary school children spend nearly £60 million per annum on cigarettes, setting them on an expensive path. In the fifth year, 27% are already regular smokers. Research shows that these people will experience much greater risk of serious or lethal medical problems than those who start later in life. It would seem that not only smokers become addicted, but also governments. The tax on cigarettes brings in almost 5,000 million per annum, representing 3.7% of total revenue. There is no argument I can put to diminish the significance of this figure. The National Health Service only wastes 170 million, alleviating those suffering tobacco-induced disease. But then, for so many, it can do so little to help. The cost to the economy is estimated as 50 million working days due to smoking-induced illness, more than 10 times the number lost to strikes. Clearly, any government can be persuaded that it needs this tax just as badly as many smokers need their nicotine. But there is clear evidence that the government can raise the tax considerably higher before total revenue begins to fall. I congratulate this government for raising the tax a further 10% in the last budget, and for declaring that this was for health reasons. In real terms, cigarettes are much the same price in relation to the cost of living as they were after the war. The promise of regular large annual increases could become a plausible disincentive to new smokers. From the very beginning, the College of Physicians report called for effective public information on the risks of smoking to be disseminated to everyone. Clearly, this process is far from complete, for the large majority of smokers grossly underestimate the risk they run. If you don't believe me, try asking them. Ideally, it should be part of every school curriculum for people to be educated about how the human body works and how to treat or mistreat it. Regrettably, many schools regard exams as more important. For over 10 years now, we've had the benefit of the government health warning. At the time, this seemed a major advance, but in retrospect, it seems to have merely protected, ethically and legally, both the industry and governments from the consequences of their inaction. Any warning has to be much stronger to respond to the reality of smoking. Can seriously damage your health sounds like one day you may get a headache or a bad cough. What would be more appropriate would be a variety of messages, as adopted in Scandinavia, that actually state facts about death, disease, and addiction, prominently displayed on the pack. The tobacco industry spends $100 million a year on advertising. It claims that it does not do so to woo new smokers, but to encourage smokers to change brands. But yet, in countries where they have monopolies, they advertise just as much. Countries like Norway, where they have banned all advertising, have discovered that adult smoking decreased somewhat, but the dramatic consequence was a sharp fall in children's smoking. There is every reason to believe that the same thing would happen here, provided that all tobacco sponsorship was banned as well. Currently, the tobacco industry spends around $6 million on sports sponsorship, but they get fantastic publicity from this, hundreds of hours of television exposure, and a marked effect on children's brand loyalty and awareness. If this advertising could be phased out, the results to the media and the various sports involved need not be drastic. Tobacco represents less than 3% of the total national advertising expenditure. I'm sure other companies could take their place, and should, for no other product or service can be compared in any way to tobacco for the damage it causes. To those who fear the loss of their tobacco subsidy, I suggest they consider the ethics of persuading people, however indirectly, to do something so clearly identified as harmful. My Lords, I have ventured onto the uncomfortable question of moral considerations, not just to consider what we as individuals should do, but also how others should or should not behave. This report has one chapter that breaks new ground. It reveals the extent that this country is in the forefront of exporting all these problems, medical, ethical, fiscal, and social, to third world countries, eager to appear sophisticated, but least able to pay in the long term for the short-term advantages brought by tobacco. The battle against international slavery is not yet quite finished, it would seem. My Lords, cholera is a disease that our forebears put behind them through the power of Parliament. On this very day, more people are dying of an unnecessary, preventable disease than died during the era of cholera. Will indifference, ignorance, and vested interest continue to kill off that section of our society that cannot or will not save itself?
My Lords, it is a very great privilege and a very great pleasure to be able to be the first to convey to the noble Duke the congratulations of the whole House on a very remarkable, very impressive, and enormously interesting maiden speech. My Lords, it is characteristic of the noble Duke's high sense of duty, which he has shown in many directions over recent years, that he selected for the occasion of his maiden speech in this House, which all of us know is a somewhat nerve-wracking occasion, not one of those anodyne subjects in which we all, with easy consciences, denounce sin, but a relevant, highly relevant, very important public issue, not free from controversy. And I think we are particularly indebted to him for making that very brave choice. And I know that I speak for the whole House when I say that we do profoundly hope that, having broken the ice this afternoon, His Royal Highness will give us the pleasure of hearing him on many occasions in the future. My lords, the noble Duke spoke with great vigour about smoking, but his language was quite moderate when compared with that of his forebear, His late Majesty King James I, who made an oration on the same subject. His late Majesty observed that the habit of smoking was loathsome to the eye, hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, dangerous to the lungs, and in the black stinking fume thereof, nearest resembling the horrible Stygian smoke of the pit that is bottomless. Those observations pointed in the same direction as the noble Duke's speech, but the noble Duke won't mind my saying, expressed these truths even more vigorously. And I'm sure, my lords, we're greatly indebted to Lord Henderson of Brompton for introducing this highly important subject. It has been, if I may make one comment, not unamusing to some of us to see the quiet figure with the cynical smile at the table transformed into one of the most vigorous and articulate members of your lordship's house. And we are greatly indebted to him for this.